I was McKinley. I graduated in 1941, June of 41, so I was just about ripe for enlisting or getting in the service. I went for the Army Air Corps. We flipped a coin. There were 3 of us when we enlisted, and we all buddies went to school together, and we didn't know what to join, and so we flipped a coin and it come out Air Corps. Went down to St. Petersburg, Florida. When I left Iowa on this train, it was 20 some below zero, and 2 days later I was down there in St. Petersburg, Florida, out in the sunshine and warm air, and I said, hey, this Army ain't too bad after all. That was where we left Camp Dodge in. But I ended up in the intelligence department, where we would get all of the information for the flight that was going to be taking place, or the bombing raids were, what the in this intelligence department, they had several. They had camera units for taking pictures over the target, and then they had weather thing, and they would before we would fly, we would have a briefing, and they would tell where all the enemy, where you're liable to pick up enemy fire, encounter enemy enemy fire, and but I'd went to, for about a year, I went to these different schools learning different things that they had, for intelligence section. I went in, I went in, I think it was 42, and then all of 43, I was going to these different schools. I must have went to 5 or 6 different schools. And then in 44, in January of 44, we got on this, I was assigned to a bomb group, the 460th Bomb Group, and we went over on these here Liberty ships. And I remember it took us about a month to go over the Atlantic Ocean there, because every so often they would change their courses so that the submarines couldn't get a bead on us where we were at. And it took us about a month to go over from the United States to Italy. I think we got there near the end of January. We started around the 1st. We celebrated Christmas in the States in Savannah, Georgia, where we took off from Hampton Roads and ended up over there. We went past through the Mediterranean. Well, in Italy there, evidently we were this first group in this area. They must have bought an old farm or something over there, so you'd have enough room to build airplanes to take off and land and everything. So they had to have a big area. And I can't remember exactly a lot about it, but I know there was a small town, Spinazzola, and if we'd ever get a little time off, we'd go in there, and they had a little, like a place where you could get juice and sandwich and little thing like that for the servicemen. And it was just a small town. In fact, it was very unsanitary, and it was you can appreciate being born in the United States here after, in some of the way some of them countries lived over there in that time. And I was only about 19 years old. Yeah.
Like, that's amazing.
Yeah, you grow up fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be, yeah, that's right. It would be February, March. I ended up being over there 10 months, but I eventually went into flying. I broke my promise there about not volunteering, but I volunteered for this aerial photographer gunner, and I would go up, and that's where I take the pictures over the target, which was my main job, taking photographs. And then when I wasn't taking photographs, I was in the intelligence department, and we would try to simulate making bombing targets. Like we say, the mission we went down on was over in Munich, Germany, and we tried to show on in view, so the pilots and and the men that did the bombing could get a view, if they could take a view of what was going on. Like this would be it was the marshalling yards where all of the Germans would bring their food and ammunition, and so if we could bomb their freight yards or the marshalling yards, well, that would destroy some of the enemy targets.
Yeah. So you were recreating them.
Yeah. Yeah, I was creating it. And then the pilots, when they weren't flying, they would come up in the intelligence area, and they could view, so they would get a general idea of what the area would be, or where you may encounter. It'd have a map there where you may encounter the enemy thing, because we didn't have escort. We didn't have escorts to protect us there, except in certain areas where we would define where the Germans were had heavy bombardment or something. The intelligence section they had like before you go on a mission, they have what they call a briefing. They wake you up in the middle of the night, you go eat breakfast, and then you go in. The whole bunch goes into this briefing room, and they tell you, well, the weather's going to be here, and they say, when you go over Yugoslavia, you may run into enemy attack over in that area, you know, and they would give you all the briefing that they knew that was things that might happen that might not startle you or surprise you or something, and then when we first went over there in the beginning, like I was saying, well, we were losing quite a few planes, and they grounded us for a week or two. They wouldn't let us fly. They made us go up in the air so that we were closer together, closer knit. The pilots weren't familiar with what was going to happen either, you know, and they were flying too far apart, so they grounded us and made them fly in closer together so that the target wouldn't be as big to hit, I guess, is the main thing. And I was on the ground then. I wasn't flying right there in to begin with, but we lost on the second or third mission after we arrived there on the second bombing mission, we lost our Colonel Crowder. He was the head of the group, and so then that's when they decided that we had to train a little bit more closer together. The pilots did, and all. And so the intelligence department kind of helped out where we could. I don't know what I was kind of a clerk there, more or less, until I started flying. But we anything to assist the pilots or so they wouldn't be, you know, everything would be. They'd know what was going on, more or less. Had in the camera department, in the photograph department, they would have one man that would go up, and he would fly in a certain in the formation where they would take pictures going over the target to see where the bombs hit, and any bombs that had been grouped that had been over before, what the damage was. Then we would bring them photos back, and they would develop them, and they could say what the damage was, or we'd know how much damage was done. And they had the fella that was the photographer going over there was old Tex. He was an older man, about 40 years old, and he was about ready to get out, or he had had enough missions. So they needed another photographer, so I volunteered. That's what I was going to say. I volunteered on that deal to be a photographer, and I started flying and ended up doing 22 missions then over the target.
And it was all over Italy?
Yeah, over in Italy. And the photographers they would space them so that they weren't all right next to each other. They would put them in one group would go over, then the other one would come in. They'd have a photographer there to take pictures and of the bombs, what the damage was, and then that's where some of the if they knew where to bomb the targets where they were and everything, like we would show up in the before they even took off, or in the briefing they were told different things. And maybe have you ever heard of Pulaski? That used to be a big oil producing thing. And I remember, I think the second or third mission I went on, it was a real heavy, they had a lot of guns there. And they had these here pots that were, they would put out smoke. It would just be like a fire or smoke, so that you couldn't tell where the bombs, could hit or anything. And I was thinking there, some of them times we'd come back and only half the planes would get back. I mean, this is earlier in the war. Then later, after a lot of bombing and everything, well, we had bombed enough of their oil factories and ball bearing factories, and they were getting low on different things and everything, and we never encountered as much enemy contact as we did at the beginning of the war. Yeah, now I flew with different crews. I wasn't on a B-24 has 10 crew members, and each one of them has a job to do. There are 4 officers and 6 enlisted men, and they all have certain jobs to do. Well, my job as a photographer was I would throw out, they called it a chaff. It's like these icicles on a Christmas tree. Did you ever see that tin foil they put on them? And I would have boxes of it, and I'd throw that out before we'd get to the target, so that the radar could not tell how high we were, because they could set their guns for certain heights, And before, if they didn't have chaff, sometimes the Germans would send up a plane just to see what our elevation was, and then they'd wire to the ground. They'd know how high to fly. But if they're with this chaff, it would mess it up. If they couldn't get a plane up, the chaff would. It's like a radar on a speeders. You know how they can mess up your radar.
Yes.
Are you familiar? Well, it was on that principle anyway. And this crew that I was flying with, that when we went down, they were on their 49th mission. They were ready to go home after this mission, and that's when we were shot down. They didn't make it, and I didn't know. I'd flew with this crew once or twice, because a lot of times I would fly, like I said, with different crews, because they would space you wherever they wanted the camera. They would have it in there. In that airplane, there's a hole between the tail gunner and the waist gunners. There's a hole where they set the camera. It's a great big, it must be a real expensive camera that was taking pictures. It'd have to be to take them for 35,000 feet. And we had to dump that out then after we were hit. Our nose gunner got blown out of the turret going over the target. I tell you, I looked out the waist window. My office, I guess you say, in the airplane was in between the tail and the waist. Do you know what a B-24? There are 2 waist guns on each side in the middle of the plane.
All right.
And I looked out there, and man, the sky was just full of flak. They must have had us honed in pretty good. I looked out there, and the sky was just all over. I don't know how you could miss. Well, anyway, our nose gunner evidently was blown out of the turret going over the target. And so our navigator went down to take care with a walk-around oxygen bottle, because you're on oxygen up that high, you have oxygen. And he went there, and so after we got him settled, the tail gunner went into the nose of the plane. Then I took over the tail gun, the tail turret. And I only took over 2 times. I had to, because I was just kind of extra baggage, more or less, unless somebody got hurt or, We did have there was one incident, one of the photographers, I don't know if he volunteered or he was 17 years old, and he volunteered, but he had his parents sign, because I think you had to be 18 to enlist. But he wanted to enlist, and his parents signed for him, and he became a photographer. And evidently a piece of this flak, which is metal, it hit him on the side, just ripped him open. He was bleeding to death, and they threw him out over Germany then. And they used to have a gal named Axis Sally who would get on the air on the radio there in Germany, and she would say, well, your boys are taking out your girls, and they would try to build you down morally, you know.
Oh, the psychological.
Psychological thing. Axis Sally, they called her. I don't know if and she says, we have one of your boys. So the Germans took him, put him in the hospital, and when we took off from Spinazzola, Italy for this here last mission, it was Munich, Germany. And on the way to the target, we lost one engine. Well, what they do, they feather the prop so that, you know, the wind don't hold you back. So with 3 engines, you can keep up with the group, whole bomb group, to bomb it over there. And we were all right, but we got to the initial point, which is they have before you get to the target, you take off and set your plane to a certain angle to go over make sure you're in the area of the target, I guess, or something. And we lost another engine there, so we only had 2 engines. And then after we went through and had to drop the bombs because the pilot said he was losing out with it. When you don't have enough power, you can't keep up with the whole group, you know. And after we come out of that there, after dropping the bombs, we had 1 engine. And that's when we had to leave. The group came on back for the thing, and I think there were 6 airplanes that didn't make it that went down that day. I had listed them at home, but anyway, so we had 1 engine, and so we said the navigator who went down with this here nose gunner that was he didn't know where we were at. He you know, he hadn't kept track of where we were at, and he couldn't get us to Switzerland, but we were headed for Switzerland. But in the meantime, the plane was so badly shot up and gas was leaking, it was coming in the waist window, and if anybody had lit a match, we'd have blew up in the sky. But anyway, he was taking care of the nose gunner there that was blowing out of his target. He hit his arm, and so we headed for Switzerland, but eventually we ran out of gas, and you're up in the mountains. There's no place to land up there in the Alps mountains. So the pilot, we had to throw everything out. I say this big camera, I bet it was thousands of dollars, that camera. You gain extra strength or something. I pick it up like it was, do it out. And then there were these cans with ammunition. We dumped everything, the machine guns, and trying to lighten the plane as much as we could to get as far as we could to maybe make it to Switzerland. But we eventually got down to where the gas was gone, and we had to bail out. And I remember as I was bailing out, as I went to the front of the plane to jump out the thing there, I must have caught the ripcord or something, and my parachute opened in the airplane, and there's a pilot chute, and it come out, and I just grabbed it like this, went like this, and I jumped out, and it blew right up in my face when I got out. But if it would have opened and caught onto that airplane, I'd have went down with it. I was up in the air when I seen the plane crash on the ground then. But we only had one engine at the time, and so that's that. But you know, that coming down in that air in that thing, that was the most peaceful time. There was you're just floating down in the air, you know, and I thought, well, what if a German plane come by there though, and you were just hanging there, you couldn't fight it off or anything. So, but you think of a lot of things go through your mind when you might, you know. But I was lucky to get out anyway, away from the plane, far enough that it didn't catch. And all of us got out except one. The pilot was the last one, and when he went out, he must have hit his head, because when we lit on the ground the next day, we got together, and he would kind of look. He'd have to hold his head to a side to get the right view or something with it. And so we looked up a doctor there in France. There, the people that took us to the doctor. And at the time, the doctor was taking the leg off of a French resistor who had been shot by the Germans. He had been out on a raid, blowing up a boxcar or something, So the officers went in and they said, this guy, his leg, evidently they held off, taken it off because they didn't have medicine and all surgical equipment that being in a house or in a person's house, but they took the pilot there to have him check his eye when we went into this here, whatever it was. The enlisted men didn't go in, the officers went in, and they said when they were in there, this guy, gangrene had set in, and when they cut it, they couldn't they give him some kind of alcohol or something to put him under or to relieve something as much as they could. But when they cut it, they said the gas come out of his leg. He had gangrene had set in, and and we didn't. The enlisted men, we didn't know a lot about it, though. The officers kind of. I can't even remember which one of the guys that I was near, but him and I got together, and we lit near must have been a field or something, and there were children out there farming or disking or something there, and we said Americans, American. They said Bosch, Bosch, and Bosch means German. I didn't know what it meant there at the time, but so the Germans evidently seen there was a German station some days near there, and they must have seen it, and they probably would come out after us. So the
children warned you.
Yeah, and they took us to some adults who were in the underground, more or less, or they were faithful German patriots. They didn't see it was occupied. France was occupied by Germany at the time.
Oh, so you landed in occupied France.
And
but the children that you landed in the field, they were French.
That's right, and their parents must have been. Well, if anybody comes here, you ain't going to go befriend a German or a Japanese or anybody. We're going to do what you can against them. Well, and so their parents must have. Anyway, they took us, and they got about 4 or 5, half of us together, and they took us in a park and hid us in this park or a hiding place. And then the rest of them, the next day, we got together, and one of our, I'll never forget, one of the co-pilot, when he lit, when you light in a parachute, it's about the equivalent of jumping off of a roof, 11 foot or 10 foot or something. It isn't just, you just don't settle down real easy.
Oh,
he sprained his ankle, and they brought him in on a donkey. He was riding the donkey. The other guys were walking. We always made fun of him then.
Because he was on a donkey.
They had to bring him in on a donkey. But we got together then, all of us, and we hid in this forest for a while. They hid us, and then we went to different groups. There were different organized underground people that were fighting the Germans. In fact, they would have every now and then, if the Germans would catch these here Free French trying to blow up a boxcar or something, well, you'd end up in a firefight or something with them. And this one guy had evidently been hit with that bullet, and he never done anything with it for a while. The one I told you with the gangrene. Yes. And he had a girlfriend, and she went with him then. She stayed with him all the time. She went with us when we had to leave there and everything. What this doctor did, or what he did, he made a cardboard, they made a patch, and they put a band on it, and he would, but he still had to kind of tilt his eye or something, or had to tilt to see good, but it closed off the one eye, this here patch, where the doctor, when we went to the police. But these here French people, they had, there was one of their from France there that joined that, and they called him back at this time, and he organized this underground. There would be different sections. There were 3 or 4 divisions where they would put different people in charge to find out what the Germans were doing and where they were going and what's happening with them, and how to, if they could go, like, could we bomb this here place tonight? Are the Germans going to be by there, or has there been any activity in that area? But they called him back, and he organized these different units where they were, and they would contact each other some way. I don't know whether by phone or or how they did it then, because in them days they didn't have a lot of this electronic stuff, you know. So then they would shift us. One time we'd be with this one group, then we was with this hospital group to start with. They were, because of the pilot with his thing, that's how we got hooked. Then they sent us with another group that was, because we had talked about getting back to the base, you know, and there wasn't anybody, the sprained ankle was the only, we hadn't been shot at or anything by the Germans. We hadn't even encountered the Germans yet. They kept hiding us, taking us to different places, you know. Sometimes we'd have to sleep out in the open, just had a blanket at night, and other times we would have facilities to sleep in, you know, and they would treat you, give you the meals or food that they had and everything. And they were all sympathetic to the Americans, these here French that we were with anyway in that area. And but there were some of them. There was a Vichy government that France set up. I don't know if you had ever heard of it or not, but and these people were up in the mountains, and I think down in some of them towns like New York or Miami, if it was here, well, some of them people would have been against, and they would have joined the German thing, you know, because some of them, one of them squealed where we had to leave. At the end, we had to leave because somebody told them where we were with this outfit, and they came after us. Then this is after near the end of our saga. When we were liberated, it was Grenoble where some of the when we came down out of the mountains, the Alps. We had these here French guides, so that in the summertime they would take visitors, and these guides were familiar with them Alps mountains as we would be with First Avenue or Second Avenue or Ellis Park or, you know, around here. Them guides, and we had guides that were more or less taking us and, you know, around to the places where to go and all. We had talked about going down through Spain, getting back to our base, and we split up into 5 and 6, and we put on French uniforms, and we were going to go, but we had to go through these towns to get to get to Spain even, you know. And the first day, the people, we stood out like a sore thumb, because they'd talk French to us, and we'd look at, what do you mean? We don't understand you. So we couldn't hide out that way to get in these towns and we were going to try to go, you know, get back through. But they were taking us in this truck up to this town, little town, probably a little town like Solon or some small town.
In Spain or?
This is in France.
In France, okay.
Yeah, we didn't even make it. We gave up after a day or two on that Spain deal. That was a bad deal. That was the wrong decision. But anyway, this here, French, there was a German, he must have been a head schmoly up there in France, because he had a big old car, and the roof was down, and he would they were headed for another town in France or someplace, and they said the Germans are coming, and this here group was behind us, and this truck gave out on us. The coal went out, or so we had to push it out of the travel where this here road where this German bunch came, and we went into some of the different. I went into a house. I don't know, was alone or with another guy, but anyway, this person took me and they hid me there, and I seen this German barrage go by. Then this guy was sitting there in the back. It was like a big open sedan, but it was a big stretched out thing, you know, and it had a top where you could fold it like a convertible or something. And he was sitting there, and he had some of his men with him, and then they had a few of the German troops were there too, but they passed on through then, and then we came out of hiding. And just before we were in this here with this, we happened to be with this hospital unit, and they said one of the we had it pretty well made, because they were up in the mountains, they have these little retreat. They'll have little cabins, you know, and people used to go there to, so they said, but the gal that was she did the washing and the maid or something for this here unit that we were in this area we were at. She squealed where we were, because I don't know whether they give her money or pay her or what, but she squealed on us. I found that out after we had left there. Then who it was in the book or something, it might tell about that. But I found some of that stuff out after this had all happened, you know. But anyway, so we left, and we went to this. We took off kind of in the morning, and we traveled, and this German bunch came after us then. They were following us, and they got to this one thing, and we had some of the French resistance group there with the guns and all, and so we got to this place where we thought we could have, where evidently whoever, I don't know who's in charge doing that, but they stopped, and they were going to encounter this group there then, because I don't know, it wasn't a big bunch, it was maybe 10 or 12, 15 guys, I don't remember, but so we went to this one area, and all the Americans, they put us on, there was a hill, and we took some of the, I remember taking that guy with the leg off there, we carried him up and got him out of the line of fire, which was going to be a battle down below, and we were up there, maybe 100 yards or more, and the Americans then we could watch that battle going on down below us, and every once in a while I'd stick my head up there out to see what's going on. All of a sudden a bullet come whizzing by, so I kept pretty low for a while. But so then during the night there, to get away, I don't know, they just took us. I don't remember anybody, the bunch going, but one of these guides, you know, that were familiar with the area, well, they took us over to another hiding place. we were hiding out all over, playing hide and seek up in France.
Just trying to get back to the Italy base.
Yeah, that's about it. Yeah, and then after we heard that this southern invasion had come up through around the southern part of France, it wasn't D-Day. It was like an invasion of D-Day, only it was off of the Mediterranean there, you know, and it come up by Grenoble, and so we came down out of the mountains, and while we were there, we were talking with the different soldiers right up there, and this French underground, or the French patriot, he came by and he had a couple of these here, they call them mashed potatoes, hand grenades, and then he had a couple of Luger guns, German Luger. I don't know if you ever heard of them.
I sure have.
And and our pilot wanted to take a German Luger gun home as a souvenir, so he had one of the French guys say, "Would you trade for the Luger?" And he gave him a pair of his flying coveralls, and the guy said, "Yeah." And they were passing this gun around then, you know, and one of the guys pulled the trigger, and I was sitting right by the pilot, and it went in the pilot's leg and came out, and then I was sitting next to him, and the pilot was on my side, and it went into my leg right here and came out the bottom here and ended up in the floor of the place we were sitting. They took me to a what they call field hospital, and they cleaned the wound out. They said there might be powder burns or powder or something in it, and they cleaned it out, and then they had sent with they have these C-47s, and they have bunks in them, and they flew me to a hospital in Italy, in Naples. And then I came home after that. They sent me home. I didn't have to do any more flying. That was I think I got credit for the 22nd, or maybe it was the 23rd mission. I don't know, but I don't know what I got credit for. But and the pilot, he went to a different where he went. They must have had for officers a little better thing.
This organ-free.
But the thing I went in, it was just a big area like this, and they'd have a bunch of cots, you know, and they would come around every 4 hours, and I'd just get to sleep, and the guy'd come around and punch me in I'd have to have a shot of that there so I didn't get any infection. Then I come back and was in the hospital there, and then I come back on the Queen Mary, which is that's in California now, I think, isn't it? And it is when we got within, I think, 300 miles of the United States, we were able to leave this here barrage of ships, and we came in ahead. We were with this hospital unit, and that was this here maid evidently told them we were there, and then some way or another they found out that the Germans were coming after us. And I don't know whether it was coming after us or they were just after the enemy, that they would, there was they said there was a unit of them there or something. So I don't know whether it was us they were coming after, but I remember this one fella there. He was a Free French, and he had been on a raid, and they said the next day he got on like a streetcar or a thing there to get on, and the Germans, somebody must have squealed, told him about it, and they came over, got him, and they killed him the next day. We just shook hands with him that day, and then next day they said he got killed. It was in about November, just before Christmas in 45, or 40, yeah, 45, yeah, because 44. I had it kind of divided into three different areas in the Army. I went in, I took the basic training for a year and went to school, and then I was overseas for 10 months, and then I come back, and they put me, they didn't know where to put me, so I was stationed down in Biloxi, Mississippi, and I was going out for basketball there, the basketball team, and this other guy and I were practicing in the lunch. The mess hall closed. We'd waited too long, So this guy was in the, I don't know what he was, but he said, "Hey, I know where we can get something to eat." In the church down the street there used to have, for service people, they'd come in and they'd sing songs and have sandwiches and eat and play games and everything. And so I went down there to get a sandwich or something, and I met this gal, and she's the one I married.
Oh,
she was a church pianist, and every time that I would go there to pick her up, well, the preacher would be preaching. He'd be saying, you're a sinner, you're going to hell, and you're cigarettes and tobacco and wild women. And I said, man, that guy's talking to me. So I accepted the Lord down there as a Savior. So now I'm a Christian, and turned around and had all a different philosophy.
Oh, darn.
So that's another story.